Hello, my name is Michael Golden, and welcome to Mayor's Ham Shack. My call sign is KM8YOR. I am a general class amateur radio operator, and today I want to talk about some of the questions that you may encounter on the technician license exam. The subset of questions we're talking about is the T2 operating procedures, and we are in section A. And in section A, we talk about the station operation, like choosing an operating frequency, calling another station, and doing test transmissions. We also talk about band plans, calling frequencies, and repeater offsets. There are 12 questions total in this section. Please keep in mind only one question will be taken from this set onto your technician license exam. But it's important to know these both as you operate once you get your license, as well as just generally being prepared for the test. Question 1. What is a common repeater frequency offset in the 2-meter band? A, plus or minus 5 megahertz, B, plus or minus 600 kilohertz, C, plus or minus 500 kilohertz, or D, plus or minus 1 megahertz. So as a person who doesn't have their license yet, you haven't even possibly even picked up a radio yet, you may not know what some of these things are going on. So 2-meter band is a specific part of the band. It's roughly about 144 megahertz in the whole frequency spectrum. This is considered VHF operating area. And one thing to know about is this is the most common place to find repeaters other than 70 centimeters, which is higher frequency in the 400 megahertz range. So when we're talking in this 140 megahertz range, we have a few specific guidelines we go by. And one of them is the repeater frequency offset. So when we're talking about an offset, we're talking about what's the difference between the repeater signal that I listen on and then the one I transmit on to the repeater, so the repeater repeats out what I'm saying. There's a general guideline for what all of those are, and we try not to deviate too much from that because this is kind of how we make sure we maintain our space so that we have the space for other things. So we all follow these rules. We won't play too much in the simplex area. We'll make sure that's open, and we'll understand if we need to program our radio what's likely we need to do to connect to that repeater. No. So if it's 147.9, it'll be either 147.3 or 148.5. So that's kind of how that works. So if it's plus, it's 148.5. If it's minus, it's 147.3. What is the national calling frequency for FM simplex operations in the 2-meter band? A, 146.52, B, 145 megahertz, C, 432.1 megahertz, or D, 446.0 megahertz. So again, a quick identifier here is it says 2 meters. 2 meters is a 140 or 144 megahertz band. So we can eliminate 2 right now by just knowing that. So 2 meters is not going to be C or D. So it's either A or B. So again, this one comes down to memorization. It's 146.52. Now you may ask, what is a national calling frequency? What a national calling frequency is I can transmit on that. I'm not talking on a repeater. That's what simplex means. It means if I'm on 146.52, the other person's listening on 146.52, there's no intermediary in between that is going to retransmit my signal. So on 8.52, I can do what's called call CQ. I can call out and say, hey, CQ, 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 this is KM8YOR, just looking for someone to chat with. Now on a national calling frequency, I can do that. And then if someone calls back and says, this is W9WW, I'd love to chat with you. I say, okay, W9WW, this is KM8YOR. Please QSY, which means to change frequency, to 145.9. And then we both go to 145.9 and we continue to talk and do all that. National calling frequency is just to start a contact. It is not to sit there and have what we would call a rag chew and just sit there and talk the whole time. So on a national calling frequency, you get on, you talk, you make contact, and then you move so that the national calling frequency is open for other people and you can have your conversation without bothering anybody else. What is a common repeater frequency offset in the 70 centimeter band? A, plus or minus 5 megahertz. B, plus or minus 600 kilohertz. C, plus or minus 500 kilohertz. Or D, plus or minus 1 megahertz. So again, we talked about this earlier. We have the 2 meter band, which is in the 140s, and the 70 centimeter, which is in the mid 400s. So we're in a bigger, the way I remember this is it's a bigger number. There is more room in the 70 centimeter band, so the offset is much bigger. And so again, memorization, the offset is plus or minus 5 megahertz. Every repeater in the 70 centimeter band, if they're following the general guidelines, they're at 5 megahertz. They can be uncoordinated, they can be not following this rule if they really want to, but there's a reason why we call these good practices. It's because everyone generally agrees on them and they have worked for a very long time. So we just keep it that way. That way we can continue to work together and we haven't had any problems. What is an appropriate way to call another station on a repeater if you know the other station's call sign? A, say break, break, then say the station's call sign. B, say the station's call sign, then identify with your call sign. C, say CQ 3 times, then the other station's call sign. D, wait for the station to call CQ, then answer. Okay, so let's talk about these a little bit. A, break, break, then the call sign. Break, break tends to be something you see in movies or on CB radio. We don't really say that in amateur radio. So that one you can kind of skip. B, say the station's call sign, then identify with your call sign. That sounds like a good practice, but let's check the other answers. C, say CQ 3 times, then the other station's call sign. So we would do this on simplex. That makes sense. So that's a possibility. D, wait for the station to call CQ, then answer. Well, that one doesn't make sense because how can they call me if they don't know I'm looking for them? So we kind of eliminated A, we've kind of eliminated D, we're stuck with B and C as options. When we're talking about repeaters, it is frowned upon to call CQ on a repeater. I think this is silly. I think it's completely acceptable if you call CQ on a repeater. But just know that some people take offense to it. And you've been on the internet, obviously, if you're watching this video, and you know for sure that there are people who just have weird quirks about them, and the rules are the rules, and things have to be that way. This, unfortunately, is kind of one of those rules, and I'm not a fan of this question being in the question pool, but it is. You need to know it. So the correct answer is, say the station's call sign, then identify with your call sign. So in this instance, somebody is calling out on the repeater. This is a great way to do it. Say, hey, W3WW, this is KM8YOR, and then you're letting that person know that you're out there, you want to talk to them, you give them your call sign so they can respond back. Now, on the CQ stuff, I've called CQ. In fact, I've called just quote unquote following repeater etiquette and not calling CQ, and I would get nothing. Repeaters are dead. But then I would just suddenly call CQ, 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 this is KM8YOR. It's not like somebody would come on. It's kind of ironic, honestly. Now, I'm not saying you should go out there and irritate people or not follow the rules and things like that. Um, but if you're sensing a quiet repeater and you really want to see if somebody's listening, calling CQ is not a bad way to stir the pot, so to speak. Just keep in mind, some people may be upset about it. They may scold you for it. I don't agree with that, but unfortunately, that's life. This is open. This is open world. And repeaters are other people's equipment, oftentimes. If it's not your equipment, try to respect. So, especially if it's the repeater owner and he comes on and say, hey, buddy, please don't do that here. Just apologize, and then at that point you can decide if you want to move on and not use that repeater again, or maybe you still end up having a conversation and maybe learning a thing or two. It can work both ways, and that's okay. Question 5. How should you respond to a station calling CQ? A. Transmit CQ followed by other station's call sign. B. Transmit your call sign followed by the other station's call sign. C. Transmit the other station's call sign followed by your call sign. D. Transmit a signal report followed by your call sign. So CQ is the very, very beginning, the search for a contact. And so the best thing to do here is transmit the other station's call sign followed by your call sign. We don't want to exchange signal reports until we've established a connection. If you work on computers and stuff like that, you'll know different computers will do handshakes. And they'll do handshakes a couple times until they've established a firm connection. And in a way, this is kind of what's going on here. Saying, hey, I hear you, this is KM8YOR, go ahead, and then let's say it's W3WW. W3WW says, hey, KM8YOR, my name's so-and-so, good to hear you. And I could say, thank you, W3WW, my name is so-and-so, and glad to go, hey, your signal is 5.9. And he can come back and say, oh, great, thank you. Yours is 5.4. And then we can continue to talk or close the contact there. By the way, the 5.4, the 5.9, those are numbers you'll learn, especially if you start doing HF stuff. Not really going to be covered in the test. I don't think it's covered in the technician test. But just keep that in mind. We can talk more about that another time. Question 6. Which of the following is required when making on-the-air test transmissions? Identify the transmitting station. B. Conduct tests only between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. local time. C. Notify the FCC of the transmissions. Or D. All these choices are correct. So let's keep in mind here, the purpose of amateur radio is to test, to tinker, to learn. So we only have one major rule when it comes to using equipment, and that's we must identify ourselves. So the correct answer is A, identify the transmitting station. So if I'm playing around with the radio and I just want to see if it goes out, I'll just go on there and say KM8YOR, poof, and off. Maybe I have another radio listening for that, and I'm just listening to see if I could hear myself. There's a whole different array, but you have to give out your call sign when you transmit. That is the key thing to learn there. 7. What is meant by repeater offset? A, the difference between a repeater's transmit and receive frequencies. B, the repeater has a time delay to prevent interference. C, the repeater station identification is done on a separate frequency. D, the number of simultaneous transmit frequencies used by a repeater. We talked about this a little bit. We know it's not B. We know I guess it could be C, but it's not. And it's not D either. The correct answer is A, the difference between a repeater's transmit and receive frequencies. So again, the repeater is on 146.9 and the offset is plus 0.6 or 600 kilohertz. So 146.9 would become 147.5, and I would transmit on 147.5, and 146.9 would be what everybody else is listening to. What is the meaning of the procedural signal CQ? A, call on the quarter hour. B, test transmission, no reply expected. C, only the called station should transmit. Or D, calling any station. So CQ, pretty much it's just, I'm out in the ether, I'm on some frequency, and I don't know who's out there. I don't even know if somebody's listening, but I want somebody to call me back. I want someone to let me know what's going on. So I call CQ. CQ, 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 KM8YOR. CQ, 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 KM8YOR. CQ, 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 Kilo Mike 8 Yankee Oscar Romeo. And then I shut off and I listen. I might listen for 5-10 seconds. If I hear nothing, then I call back. I'm looking for someone to throw their call sign out at me. And if I don't hear anybody, that doesn't mean there isn't somebody out there calling me back. It just means I can't hear them. So the correct answer is calling any station. Which of the following indicates that a station is listening on a repeater and looking for a contact? A, CQ, CQ followed by the repeater's call sign. B, the station's call sign followed by the word monitoring. C, the repeater call sign followed by the station's call sign. Or D, QSY followed by your call sign. So this is kind of where knowing a couple Q codes might be helpful. I do believe they do talk about Q codes a little bit in the later part of the exam. Mainly so that when you get these random questions come up and they throw them in there, that you know what to avoid. So we have CQ, CQ followed by the repeater's call sign. We talked about this a little bit earlier about CQ, CQ isn't really a thing on repeaters, or at least can be irritating to people on repeaters. So that one is out. B, the station's call sign followed by the word monitoring. Okay, that might be one. Let's read the other ones. The repeater call sign followed by the station's call sign. There's no point in a transmission where you have to give the repeater's call sign. So that one is out. D, QSY followed by your call sign. QSY means change frequency. So if you're looking to get someone a contact, you wouldn't just randomly say QSY when you haven't even established a contact yet. So the correct answer is B, the station's call sign followed by the word monitoring. I understand what they're saying, and certainly this is out there, and that is fine. It's not even that they put this in there and saying this is best practice. My problem here is that they're throwing the whole CQ thing and telling you not to do this. Okay, fine, but I really feel that people are putting a couple of these questions in here because they're wanting to be more difficult than helpful, to be quite honest. So I'm going to have to just say, memorize this question and know this. But know that these are not laws. You will not find any of these questions in the Part 97 rules. So keep it as general operating guidelines that are put in the question pool to try to get you to act and behave a certain way. The ultimate thing you must do at any time is operate with respect and honor the other people around you. Um, so, talk if you end up talking to some people, you're just like, hey, do you have a problem with me calling CQ on this repeater? They say, oh, yes, please don't do it. Then just don't do it. But, I mean, try to be respectful. Um, I'm just going to be clear with you that I really don't care for this kind of question. What is a band plan? Beyond the privileges established by the FCC. A voluntary guideline for using different modes or activities within amateur band. B. A list of operating schedules. C. A list of available net frequencies. D. A plan devised by a club to indicate frequency band usage. So we can talk a little bit about this. A list of operating schedules. Well, what is a band? A band is a group of frequencies. When we talk about a plan, it doesn't necessarily mean that these are specifically your frequencies you use as you must use them this way. But we're talking about, a group of frequencies and what the suggested use of it should be. This part I do kind of agree with the ARRL and other groups who say, hey, we kind of need a concise group because ultimately this helps you find people better. This helps you connect people better. And so the correct answer is A voluntary guideline for using different modes or activities within an amateur band. I know if I'm listening into the digital part of the band plan, I'm going to hear different digital modes, and that's where I'm going to set my digital mode. It does not mean if you want to do something specific that you can't go into the phone band, especially because the digital area is pretty crowded with all the digital bands and all the different people. So if you and your buddy are testing something, um, just make sure you're not interfering with other people. Go ahead and go into the phone band. Find a random quiet spot. Use your phone. Make sure it's clear. Do not just go transmitting digital. But if it's clear, you're not going to bother anybody. Go ahead, do your experimentation, just you and your buddy in that space, and then move off. Don't shoot digital signals there for hours on end. But if you're 10 minutes testing something, I think that's fine. And that's why they're making it clear here. It's a voluntary guideline. If you want to find people doing CW, rather than having to scour the entire band to find some for CW, now it's down in a smaller group. It's much easier to find people that way. Number 11. What term describes an amateur station that is transmitting and receiving on the same frequency? A. Full duplex. B. Diplex. C. Simplex. Or D. Multiplex. So there's a lot of different terms. We can go into all the definitions of at least one of them. But the correct answer is simplex. If you and I are on the same frequency, we're talking on the same frequency, we're talking in simplex. Question 12. What should you do before calling CQ? A. Listen first to be sure that no one else is using the frequency. B. Ask if the frequency is in use. C. Make sure you are authorized to use that frequency. Or D. All of these choices are correct. Alright, let's just think for a minute about being courteous, okay? So, this is especially important in HF. It's not quite as important in 2 meter and 70 centimeter, but it should still be followed. Because you could still potentially not hear someone that's having a conversation. So, 1. Listen first, be sure that no one else is using the frequency. That's real easy to do. There's no reason not to do this. Listen, if you hear nothing after 5-10 seconds, then you should go on to the next step. B, ask if the frequency is in use. So go, this is KM8YOR, is the frequency in use? And then listen. If you hear nothing, then you're good to go. But oh, by the way, you should probably also make sure you're authorized to use that frequency before you even ask if the frequency is in use. So the correct answer is D. All of these choices are correct. So now let's go like we did in the other videos. Let's go back. I'm just going to read the question, read out the potential answers, and then tell you the answer, and we'll go through all 12. Question 1. What is a common repeater frequency offset in the 2-meter band? A, plus or minus 5 megahertz, B, plus or minus 600 kilohertz, C, plus or minus 500 kilohertz, or D, plus or minus 1 megahertz? The correct answer is B, plus or minus 600 kilohertz. Question 2. What is the national calling frequency for FM simplex operations in the 2-meter band? A, 146.52 megahertz, B, 145.0 megahertz, C, 432.1 megahertz, or D, 446.0 megahertz? And the correct answer is A, 146.52 megahertz. What is a common repeater frequency offset in the 70 centimeter band? A, plus or minus 5 megahertz, B, plus or minus 600 kilohertz, C, plus or minus 500 kilohertz, or D, plus or minus 1 megahertz? And the correct answer is A, plus or minus 5 megahertz. Question 4. What is an appropriate way to call another station on a repeater if you know the other station's call sign? A, say break break, then say the station's call sign. B, say the station's call sign, then identify with your call sign. C, say CQ 3 times, then the other station's call sign. D, wait for the station to call CQ, then answer. And the correct answer is B, say the station's call sign, then identify with your call sign. 5. How should you respond to a station calling CQ? A, transmit CQ followed by the other station's call sign. B, transmit your call sign followed by other station's call sign. C, transmit other station's call sign followed by your call sign. D, transmit a signal report followed by your call sign. And the correct answer is C, transmit the other station's call sign followed by your call sign. Question 6. Which of the following is required when making on-the-air test transmissions? A, identify the transmitting station. B, conduct tests only between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. local time. C, notify the FCC of the transmissions. Or D, all of these choices are correct. And the correct answer is A, identify the transmitting station. Question 7. What is meant by repeater offset? A, the difference between a repeater's transmit and receive frequencies. B, the repeater has a time delay to prevent interference. C, the repeater station identification is done on a separate frequency. Or D, the number of simultaneous transmit frequencies used by a repeater. And the correct answer is A, the difference between a repeater's transmit and receive frequencies. 8. What is the meaning of the procedural signal CQ? A, call on the quarter hour. B, test transmission, no reply expected. C. Only the called station should transmit. Or D. Calling any station. And the correct answer is D. Calling any station. Number 9. Which of the following indicates that a station is listening on a repeater and looking for a contact? A. CQ CQ followed by the repeater's call sign. B. The station's call sign followed by the word monitoring. C. The repeater call sign followed by the station's call sign. D. QSY followed by your call sign. And the correct answer is B. The station's call sign followed by the word monitoring. Number 10. What is a band plan beyond the privileges established by the FCC? A. A voluntary guideline for using different modes or activities within an amateur band. B. A list of operating schedules. C. A list of available net frequencies. Or D. A plan devised by a club to indicate frequency band usage. And your correct answer is A. A voluntary guideline for using different modes or activities within an amateur band. 11. What term describes an amateur station that is transmitting and receiving on the same frequency? A. Full duplex. B. Diplex. C. Simplex. Or D. Multiplex. The correct answer is C. Simplex. Number 12. What should you do before calling CQ? A. Listen first to be sure that no one else is using the frequency. B. Ask if the frequency is in use. C. Make sure you are authorized to use that frequency. Or D. All of these choices are correct. And the correct answer is all of these choices are correct. Thank you so much for joining me in the part A of T2. I really hope you enjoyed it. Please thumbs up, subscribe, leave any comments, concerns, questions. I would be glad to answer them for you. This is KM8YOR, 7 3s.